Okay, so today I am with two fantastic people, actually in two different locations. I have Solonje and Syisha. Solonje, where in the world are you today?
I'm in Brooklyn, New York.
Nice, a nice tapestry behind you. That is super, super chic.
Organic wool hanging.
Love it, love it, love it.
Show off.
And Syisha, where are you? You've got nice lamps hanging, like you get compliments
Oh,
too.
you know what? Since I want to show off, let me just switch the camera. Let's fucking switch it around so I can show you where I'm at. Hold on, let
Your
me just step
fancy
outside a
pants.
second. Just,
Oh
hey,
no,
hey, hey, hey! Don't look at my fancy pants, please. Thank you.
don't take it there. That's below the belt.
So that's where you are.
Green.
You're in Grenada. Welcome home. I couldn't help it. I just had to.
Thanks. I'm just gonna
Since
try.
Miss Tapestry, and I don't have no tapestry. These 1900-year-old light fixtures in the back there. Hey, I'm feeling bad.
Thanks. I feel worse about myself now. It worked. Good. So the reason why I brought these two fantastic people together is not just because of their fantastic scenery and tapestry, is that they're both, good link. They're both super plugged into an issue which I'm really passionate about and which is highly connected to the Caribbean, and that is the issue of cannabis. I came across Syisha because he's one of the few people in Grenada that's been speaking publicly about the issue, and Solonje, a friend of mine, connected me to you a year ago. And we've kind of been having chats informally between us, but I just thought, given that 2021 is on the way, things are happening in the region, like let's share this conversation and get people, mainly in the US, who are thinking about coming to the Caribbean, thinking about how we can build bridges between what's happening in the islands. So Syisha, I might start with you, given that you've been in Grenada the longest. When did you arrive back on the island, and what's your story and connection to this wonderful herb of cannabis?
Well, I tried coming home in 2004, but then Ivan had other plans, and it showed me that I wasn't ready yet. So I had to leave again and go. And I came back in 2012, and that has been quite an interesting journey. Since 2012 to now, there's been a lot happened to improve just the environment around cannabis. But 2012 to 16, I was going back and forth every 6 months or so. And then 16, I decided the plant needs more attention than it can get when I'm not around. And until the plant starts bearing fruit, I probably shouldn't leave it alone, because every time you come back, it will be a dead plant. So I stopped in 2016 so that I can nurture this plant until it bears fruit. And then after that, whatever happens. I think I should be happy after the plant bears fruit.
Yeah,
so to
all
speak.
of us. All of us. That's fantastic. And Solonje, tell us about you and like how honored we are to actually have you chatting with us, because you have like a really extensive history in this movement.
Yeah, so I guess just if thinking about the island specifically, I'm first generation, so I was born in Massachusetts in the United States, but my mom is from Grenada and my father, stepfather, Dominica, and I grew up in a very Christian household, you know, all of the, no, you cannot do that, you cannot say that, you must behave certain ways. And so I've always been a person who has been curious and interested in a variety of topics, and never able to really focus in on one. So whether I'm singing on stage or I am hosting or co-hosting breathwork sessions, or just working on creating community through curatorial experiences, bringing people together through one thing, but diverse populations so that they can find humanity in these spaces, and creating safe containers through experience. I've been bouncing around, and finally about 3 years ago, cannabis came to me, the plant, in the way that I was working at a startup, and it was all about human connection in the workplace, and how do you make it so that people feel valued, respected, and heard? What is the value behind deep listening? How do you make it so as a leader, you're not just with an iron fist, you're inclusive and cooperative and are interested in structures that support all? And leaving that nonprofit, that startup, it was not a nonprofit, it was a startup, leaving that space, I was really pained. I didn't know where I was going to go that had that kind of energy, and the plant called me in. Started working with a friend and doing a lot of discovery calls to figure out what was missing in the space. And I think that is what that's where a lot of people miss the mark. They go in, and that's in all industry. They go in saying, I have a solution, I'm going to do this, rather than taking a pulse and listening to what's happening already in the conversation to figure out where you can plug in, where you can bring value. And so we started Humble Bloom, which is an education and advocacy platform in the cannabis space that also does consulting and helping brands bloom consciously. And originally we wanted to have a product, because everyone wants to have a product and they think that's how they're going to make money, but that's totally wrong, because there are a gazillion products, and how do you stand out? And unless you have some rich uncle, father, parent, sibling to get the financial backing to do that, you are going to lose and fail. And it's very much, whether it's product, anything that's plant touching that requires a lot of capital, it's very hard to get into. So we decided, let's create community, let's create education, let's create advocacy, let's connect the dots for people to understand what this plant is, since it's been so demonized and has been just completely destroyed by the powers that be, so that they can control capital. And so we've been doing this now for 3 years, based in Brooklyn, but we have done things in California, we have partners in Toronto and in Mexico. And I just realized, as I've been doing this, what's going on in the Caribbean? Like, where this plant, where we have so much beautiful music that comes, that's revolutionary, that is about how do we heal ourselves with this plant? How do we communicate with each other through this plant? And so my interest was literally sparked in the past year or so about how do I bring the knowledge and the gifts that I have from being immersed in an environment where there's so many different things going on, back to our people, and to help so that they get a leg up in the space.
Yeah, for sure. And that's really beautiful. And I think that's one of the things that's led me to delve deeper, is that moving in circles in London, whether it's CBD spaces or cannabis futures, like, one, everyone there is white. There's very few Black people there at all. And further, when you talk to people and then kind of say, like, you know, what are you tracking in the cannabis space in the Caribbean? They're like, it just doesn't even register. And the fact is that there is a lot going on. Like, St. Vincent has decriminalized, Jamaica, Trinidad, Antigua and Barbuda. And that issue that you talk about, how can the diaspora share their knowledge and experience to kind of bolster the region as a whole, I think is super, super fascinating. So yeah, I think it's exciting times. But Syisha, as much as Solonje and I can like dip in and out, be like, oh, maybe we can offer this, maybe we can offer that. Like, you're there on your own, fighting the good fight. What has it been like, and how have you, what's your vision that keeps you plugging away even when people just think you're an absolute crazy person who wants to corrupt their children?
That's, wow. That's, how much time you got? That could be answered in so many ways. So what's it been like? I have to say, not melancholy, but there's a weird duality to what's going on in Grenada. So when I came home, I was under the impression that if and when I started talking about this issue, I would be demonized. The police would be all up in my business. The crazy Rasta man talking. Oddly, that hasn't happened. I'm thankful and grateful that it hasn't, because it makes my life a lot easier, because it's a very small country, and once they paint you a color, that color doesn't come off. So how it's been interestingly, productively good-ish, because we still haven't changed it yet. But even down to just the other day, the Prime Minister, they read the budget and they allocated some funds for consultation. So that's more step in the right direction. So how it's been very interesting. It's hard to even like put that in words. My vision, and what brings me here, my vision is actually to have a liberated Grenada. Weed is, and I don't think a lot of people, even in the country that I'm speaking, understand what I'm truly after in terms of like legalizing cannabis in Grenada. I'm not. Most people are interested in like smoking or medicine or all the other different things, as Solonje rightfully said, products that come from weed. I'm interested in liberation. I'm not interested in freedom. I'm not interested in the fanciful words that we've been taught and phrases we've been taught for all our lives. While I'm still latched on to the tit of somebody else, and if I ever leave it, then I'm dead. I'm not interested in that no more. I think it took me 2 weeks when I got to America as a child to realize the fallacy of the message of $1 and a dream. And what brought it to my attention was I asked the question, so to American students in the class, how do you explain the $1 and a dream? And they did, rightfully so, told me that once you come with your little dollar, you invest it, you get rich, preferably, then you retire and you go to paradise. And I'm like, ooh, me likey. Paradise sounds awesome. Where would that paradise be though? And there's like, some island in Caribbean, coconut trees. And I'm like, you mean where I just came from? I'm like, where you came from? And I told them, like, yeah, that's it. So my vision is to try to is to actually tangibly liberate my people, and using cannabis as a catalyst to do so. Because since I've been home in 2012, it's been proven that cannabis has the ability in this country to start the conversation that will address everything in this country. Everything else has opportunity for its own niche. Cannabis, for some odd reason, touches all niches, whether it's the church, whether it's women's rights, whether it's poverty, whether it's foreign people coming and usurping our rights and lands, all of it. The CBI everything, energy, everything. If we want to do cannabis properly in Grenada, we have to address everything in Grenada. So I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, well, I want to address everything in Grenada. Well, why not use cannabis? So that's really the overarching vision of my cannabis plan, is to actually liberate my country where we don't need to be bowing to other people. Tired of that. Knees hurt.
100%, and I think that's why the work that you're doing and the opportunity is just so important. And we're definitely going to have to continue this conversation another time and go like really deep and just delve in. But I'm trying to skim and not like get hooked. But Solonje, from your experience, and I know like there's this saying, isn't it, like a year in cannabis is like a dog year. Things just move so quickly. But the issues or the gaps that you saw as existing when you first got into the space 3 years ago compared to where we are now, like what do you think are the sort of key needs and opportunities that are right for people of color, Black people, to consider exploring, and ideally specifically if those are options that might have some overlap with the Caribbean? That's sort of 3 questions in one, so answer whichever part of that you want.
Peel the onion.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest opportunities right now is to get yourself educated. I think that most people sleep on curiosity and the opportunity to empower yourself through education and taking that education the next step, which is action. I know that obviously activists, community organizers, folks like us, we're usually the ones that get left behind once legalization happens because we don't have money. We have all the energy and the power and the you know, just the chutzpah to go for trying to create this equitable, fair, regenerative industry, and no matter what it is, whether it's women's rights, whether it's Black liberation, whether it's cannabis, which, yes, as he said, literally touches on all things. It's a conduit for race, sexuality, consumption, for vulnerability and purpose. It's for religion. It's for everything. So I think one thing is educate and then action, but educate yourself in all things, not just okay, how does this plant work with my body, but like what is going on in the legislation right now? How can I activate the communities that I'm a part of so that they're educated and not just harbor that information for myself? Because I think what is very human, unfortunately, because of this colonized mindset that we all have from this culture that we've been indoctrinated into, is that we are not good at being in the ecosystem. We are so much about our ecosystems, about being in ourselves, taking and making money and value for ourselves, not thinking that we're only as strong as the weakest in our community, the ones that are the most under-resourced, the ones that don't have the opportunity. So whatever privileges you have, whether you're Black, white, green, or yellow, we all have different levels of privilege. How do we educate and uplift our communities so that we're on an even playing field moving forward? We got to bring along everybody with us. So I think education is the first thing. And as I said, across the spectrum, not just how does this plant help and heal me, but what's going on legally, and how do I get myself plugged in financially? One of the things I'm learning right now and going to friends that have more financial equity in the space, that have businesses that are working, that are ancillary, it is that literally I'm like, hey, what stocks should I be investing in the cannabis space? Like, remember the beginning of the tech boom? Like, if I had invested in Airbnb, if I had invested in all of these different companies, I would be sitting here pretty, and that is Black liberation. So education comes from those places first. So I think that's the one thing. It was talking about professionalism and where you can plug in right now to just get the experience that you need to possibly be, you know, affluent. And I am like an anti-capitalist, so it's really hard for me to even talk about these things. I'm like, as much as I need to make money, I know, to survive in these structures, I am like adverse to it. So it's an issue that I deal with, and I know that those two things can coexist, and that's fine. I'm accepting that about myself. But it's like, what skill sets do you have that you can, in this moment right now, apply to this space? You don't have to go learn to be an urban farmer in the city and then figure out, okay, now I'm going to have a grow. You don't need to be like, okay, I need to be a medical professional, or I need to come up with the cannabis gin to actually process these products. Although I'm like, maybe you should, that would be huge. So it's like, take your skills and plug it in. If you've been working in sales, maybe you should go work in a dispensary and be a manager. If you have been working in human connection and office structure and DEI and all of that, this industry desperately needs it, because where it was 3 years ago, actually, I think was in a little bit better of a place, because there's been this green rush of people that are hyper interested. And with that interest comes the assholes. Let me just put it out there. So whether you're in tech or you're in finance, these closed-minded, unconscious, not collaborative individuals who are just fueled by capitalism are the ones that are going to the front with their money and taking all the nasty habits and traits that they've had in previous industries into the cannabis space without care for the plant, without ever smoking it, without ever seeing it grow, without ever caring about who it's disproportionately affected in this war on people of color, essentially, through the plant. So I think it's a multi-pronged thing. And before, there were a lot more women that were leaders in the space, Black, white, or whatever. But now it's starting to normalize, and it's starting to come back to the percentages that you see across the board in different industries. At one point, it was a little bit over a third of leaders in the cannabis industry were women. And of course, there's intersectionality there that we don't have to go into, but like now it's about the same. It's about 27, 25%, and it keeps getting lower because of all of these guys with their money and their big mouths and their multi-state operations that are going from Canada into the US and taking over every time each state turns green. They're taking that capital and putting it back into these destructive systems that tear apart community, that are about one leader, one person at the top. So I think it's definitely about education, awareness about what's going on, and then taking action to empower both yourself and your community.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. And so with regards specifically to Grenada, I think, if I'm right, from all of the English-speaking countries in the Caribbean, it's the last to be having public consultations. Like most other countries, are either they have statutes on the books or they're having public consultations already. But we're the last, like we're behind everyone else, which in a way gives us space to kind of look at what's happened in other places and build in from the start something that's way more progressive, much more liberation minded, ideally. So I'm curious, like Solonje, I'm looking at what's happened in different states. I'm sure there's so many to pick from, but what do you think are some of the key lessons that Grenada should be thinking about when it comes to policy design for cannabis decriminalization on the island?
So, I don't think anyone in the States has done it right yet. Let's just start there. No one's done it right. Legalization just happened in our neighbor state of New Jersey. It's a hot mess. All of the equity was stripped out of it. We have the MORE Act that was just passed in the House of Representatives, but is like going to the Senate, and they literally are doing, they always have clauses and words in there that make it restrictive for us. They make sure to do this. So it's like one thing they were talking about with like restrictions on expungement, for example, and they're like, this would only apply to non-violent. Like, what's non-violent versus a violent marijuana offender, you know? And how are they making that decision? Based on my skin color? Probably. This is always a racially biased term when you're talking about violence and thugs and all of that. They don't take the white collar criminal and call him violent when he is affecting so many more people than somebody who's selling some dime bags in a neighborhood, you know? So that's one thing. Another thing they put in the MORE Act specifically was that 60%, I believe, of the money is designated for an opportunity trust fund, which is actually going to be to support law enforcement grant programs. Like, how are you making this marijuana opportunity reinvestment and education act that is going to put money into law enforcement when America right now, the trend is defund the police? That is what everybody is asking for. So they are looking at this as a capital opportunity rather than a community reinvestment opportunity. They want to continue in the MORE Act of federal drug testing programs, which some states have already been like, no, like New York recently was like, no, you shouldn't have drug testing because cannabis, why is that a problem? People are taking CBD, it's a medical thing. People are taking THC for their medical issues. How can you still take testing and make that a criminal offense? The other thing, what's the other thing? Oh yeah, the whole act, people who have been charged with cannabis felonies are going to be prohibited from working in the cannabis industry. What? If you've been somebody who's a legacy operator who has been working in the space above or below the line, you should be able to get in and do whatever you want. You have the education and experience, much more than some hedge fund guy who just decided to pull up with all his investment money. So that is just wild to me. And then it also changed something around the services to address collateral consequences of individuals and communities as a result of the war on drugs. So it's like, you're not going to help us. this whole act that was designed to help our communities has now been changed so that rich white men can continue to be rich and white and oppressive and patriarchal, and just completely go away from what I think is the true essence of the plant, which is this multifaceted, human, energetic, loving experience, what it could be. And instead they're whitewashing it, they're stripping it down, they're making it so that they can only make money. And it's like, for me, I realized that like having the opportunity to have the More Act even there is a beautiful start, and it's great, but we cannot ignore all of the harms of the war on drugs in exchange for decriminalization or legalization. Like, we got to do something more.
So
it's not enough.
So that piece you just touched on there, that is quite up my alley. So what it points to me, and this is what I've been trying to tell people here, one of the major reasons I'm also so vocal about it in Grenada is that we don't seem to realize this will happen. Regardless of whether we like it or not. There has been the CARICOM report that was signed in 2018, that was signed by our current Prime Minister. So since 2018, he's been okay with this. The problem is what it's going to look like. Yes. I have an issue with what it will, my issue in Grenada is not to legalize weed. We smoke weed. Everybody here has weed. It's not the fact that they don't have access to it. It's what will it look like? Will the hedge fund managers be able to monopolize everything? Will the CBI program owners will be able to come in here with their billions and just own everything? Would the regular mom and pop who's been in it for years, but because you caught her with 100 pounds, you're going to tell her she can't get into the weed industry now, and she's the one that's been growing weed for hundreds of years. These are the things.
All the knowledge.
Everything.
Okay. Her from doing this. Yeah.
So you're going to tell me the best people we have, we should leave them out. Because of what now? And my answer to that is because we don't get off our butts and get involved in the process of participating in our participatory government. We keep waiting for some magical creature, some savior to come off of somewhere and save us, like we don't have saving in our own bodies. I'm actually on Facebook right now, going through a thread with somebody, and this ingenious Black person is telling me Black people don't have power. The man just pointed out, land mass, we have the most. People, we have the most. As a matter of fact, we built every city on this planet for them. And you're telling me we don't have power? Just in terms of the money we spend every year, we collectively spend more money than everybody put on the planet almost. Then you tell me you don't have power. So if that's not power, please do me a favor. Show me what power looks like. I need to see what it looks like because I would like to touch it. I like us to have it too. So when you pass a law saying that weed is legal or decriminalized, whatever it is in Grenada, I don't want any bill. The last 500 years, they've been giving us bills. I can't remember one of us that said we got profitable off of that. All the bills, like you just said, every single time they give us a bill, they put these pretty ass words in there that make it sound so nice that they're about to kill you. And we keep going, oh, it's so nice. I like dying. That is good. No, it's not. I'm tired of that. And the only way I've seen to change that without using violence is the pen. And the only how you can get to the pen is to get involved. If you're not involved, then shush. Shush, my people. Either get up off your butts and do something, or hush.
So many opinions without education. And I think that is why I led with this. You have to have the education around what's going on so that you can take action. It's like to just run around with uninformed opinions, like that's the order of the day. And I totally agree with the power issue. It's wild. The spending power of Black people.
Astronomical.
Enormous. And what do? We give it back to the white man. So
the thing you just mentioned, we literally have power. We get the money and we just throw it right back at them, and you're like, oh my God.
But I think that's the issue, like going back to cannabis, specifically like financial literacy, like talking about the fact that like, I don't know shit about stocks. So who can I go to get that information so that I can better inform myself and set myself up for success so that I have a seat at the table and some kind of power in conversation. And I think that really goes across the board. It's like, are you educated on what's going on in your government? Are you educated and have some kind of financial literacy? Do you have any kind of business literacy? Or are you just buying to fill holes?
Yep. Because then how can you meaningfully participate if you're not informed, if you're not up to date, if you're not aware of what's going on? If you don't even look at the news, if you're not even listening to the budget when it's read, how do you know what they're planning? How do you know what the spending is? How do you know how much money we owe? You don't know anything. So unless we're going to inform ourselves so that literally there is no way they can slip things past us, then what we're saying is we like the status quo. And if that's the case, then just hush, go home.
Yeah. And I think like that clearly is the case, unfortunately, for the vast majority of people, not just in Grenada, but in the UK and probably in the US as well. Like most people, for whatever reason, have limited capacity to take on the information that they need to take on. But that doesn't mean that there can't be steps taken to shift that. And I think that's why like these sort of discussions are so important. And also like that issue about policy and what can good practice look like. If you look at St. Vincent, they have specific initiatives whereby indigenous cannabis farmers are given first access to licenses. They can apply, like I think it costs maybe 500 EC, which is virtually nothing, which differs massively from, say, Antigua, whereby locals aren't given access. I think the cost was maybe 200,000 EC. So locals like, how on earth can we afford this? So yeah, looking at what's happening in the Caribbean, there's so many different approaches. And I think there's a lot that we can learn and work collaboratively as well. You know, I think the entire Caribbean is probably like the population of New York. So why is it every single island trying to reinvent the wheel? Like, yes, you're different nations, but in terms of skills and infrastructure and supply chains and talent, like there's so much that we can learn, I think. But Syisha, in terms of where things are now in Grenada and the sense of where things might be going, what scope do you think there is for the diaspora to start offering skills, services, knowledges, whatever? Like ideally, if you could get 20 people calling you tomorrow, what should they be offering to kind of make this shift happen in the way that it needs to happen?
Start with lawyers, legal writers, people actually understand these words and what they mean, to be able to, again, increase the awareness and the education. Half of these, especially because of the Caribbean, most of the countries here are parliamentary. It's not like in America. It is not the easiest nut to crack in that sense. So one, people that understand law and willing to commit themselves and their ability to changing this thing. And then every educator you can find, from, like you said, financial educators, even just community people that, so for example, we talk a lot in the Caribbean. We talk a lot and very loudly in the Caribbean. You know what the one thing we rarely do in the Caribbean? No, there's another one. Communicate. That's part of it. We rarely ever communicate with each other in the Caribbean. So I will sit here and tell you a bunch of things. You will hear me, but we never really communicated. We never left going, yeah, I understand what you mean. Like we could do that. As a matter of fact, let's do that. Let's move to the next, like you were saying, Solonje, let's move to the next step. Now that I understand you, now that we're aware of what's going on, let's take it further and do something. Let's actionize that. So any and all educators, yes. Legal minds that's willing to commit and write things, yes. I would say investors, but I have a hard time with that because I'm one of the people that are of the opinion that most of the investment we need in the Caribbean actually is sitting in the Caribbean with Caribbean people. And if they're not sitting in the Caribbean with Caribbean people, they're in America, England, Germany, France, with other Caribbean people that refuse to work together and pool resources for some odd reason. Like the one magic trick that has worked for all other nations, we're the one nation that won't seem to do it. And I don't understand that. So those are the things I would, just for starters, would like to see happen here. It will change. Sorry, it will change how we see things, how we do things once we start seeing ourselves with ourselves. The best way I could explain that is the other day, Killer, you know, the artist, Mr. Killer. he has a lot of young men hanging around his studio, and he went up there to do an interview with him, and he said, so I took some young men out just to hang out the other evening down Grenada's in one of the local spots where people normally hang out. And he said there was about 20 of them, all men, all black. He said we got there, and most of the black people were nervous. He's like, this is the first time you ever seen that. And I was like, you need to be in America. We definitely get nervous when we see each other at times, because we've been taught this thing. We've been beaten into our head. We don't, when you see us together, don't trust each other. But when you see those guys together with the suits and tie, regardless of their color, trust those people, because they are here to help you. He said it made him wanted to do some community building exercises where men and women in this country, especially young ones, can actually see other men and women interacting with each other, not because they want to get drunk, not because they want to go party and just do dumbness, but just to hang out and build and network and communicate. And I was like, that's really interesting, because that's kind of one of the reasons, again, that I'm pushing the weed thing so much, because weed is something I've known for years that brings people together. You smoke a spliff, you bring people together. Like, I had a situation in Brooklyn where a friend of mine I went to school with stole my hat, wanted to beat me up for my own hat. My friend and his friend, we're separate. We don't know that our friend is the same. We share the same friend. So I'm on the block chilling with him, we smoking. And here comes Mr. Batman coming down the street. And how the vestibule was, he can see me behind the block. And he sees my friend. So that's his friend. They start smoking. So he passes him the split. And he's like, all right, going to pass it back. And he's like, no, pass it around the corner. He's like, what? There's somebody over there? So he looks around, he sees me, and he's like, wait, you smoke weed? I'm like, yeah. That's your friend? Also, yeah. Then why are we beefing? I don't know. Are we done? Yeah, we're good. Done. This is what weed had the potential to do. So bringing people together is like, I don't see how is that not weed. But to do certain things here, the people that's needed, most of them are not on the island, like I said earlier. And I am nervous of bringing in people that is not off the island, but I've had to almost retire that opinion, because most of our people don't seem to be willing, as much as foreigners are, to get in this fight. And this is very disturbing, because I'm seeing people that you're not related to, they don't look like you, they have no reason to be in your island or country or in your business, and they seem to be more in it and more committed than the people that actually is bleeding. And that's odd to me. I've gotten accustomed to that from being in California, but it's very odd to still see it, especially in a place like Grenada, where it's a family. Like, I don't care how you cut it, they're all related. So how is it we seem so, from each other than strangers? So I'm gonna stop rambling on. Like,
no, it's an issue. It is an issue, and I guess ultimately it's about change, isn't it? Change in a way that benefits the most people possible. And I guess if it unfortunately has to happen with people with horrible accents, making shit happen,
exactly,
and then how the people feel more comfortable afterwards, then, you know.
I'm here to bring a horrible accent into the space. And this is actually what Humble Bloom does, is community education, like creating containers to destigmatize, to truly educate and create connection, using the plant as a conduit for broader discussions. So it's whether we take people on a field trip to a cannabis farm, and on that farm, not only are you doing a community harvest, so you're learning about hanging and drying and picking and all of this stuff, but you're also having the opportunity to shop brands that are created by BIPOC creators and artisans that are Women-X owned. We're like fusing you with all of the tools you need. You're going to have a conversation or sit and watch a panel with people who are growers, people who use it for medicinal purposes, but also are doing marketing and making sure that Black people are included in the marketing, and creating lists that are accountability lists that talk about who is in the cannabis industry at these companies, who are the leaders in the space, why are there no Black people in your company? Like, we are doing all of these things, and then also having opportunities to do breath work, to do meditation, to do some kind of Shakti dance and get your body and your system moving. So it's not just about getting blazed and passing out in the corner or passing it, because not everybody likes to smoke in the first place. Some people like edibles. Some people just use it for, like, my skin is covered in this stuff. Some people can end up being, you know, brand ambassadors and sitting in a tub of bath salts and getting paid for it. You know, there's so many ways that you can get involved in this space, but it starts with community being connected, being informed, and then finding ways to connect with each other through the plant. We've had men's sessions where, you know, we had different facilitators of, you know, vulnerability, of compassion. We had conversations with investors and athletes and all these folks. So you're seeing all different kinds of people reflected on the stage. So you're seeing yourself reflected, which makes you feel more empowered to enter the industry. When you go into a space and you see a bunch of rich white men in suits talking to each other in a way that nobody can digest, and they're there with their egos and their airs of we are better than everybody, that's not a way to educate. That's why Black children don't do well in school systems, because you're being taught by people that don't look like you, that don't have your experience, and frankly don't give a shit about your advancement. So if you're seeing that in our education systems where they're teaching you things like algebra that nobody is going to use, it's like the cannabis industry is the same. They have all of these teachers who are teaching you shit you're not going to use, just so that you can buy their products, so you have it as a name brand in your head, like Nike or Adidas or whatever. So you go buy some shit you don't need, instead of being like, how do you use this plant to empower yourself? How can you help your grandmother that has arthritis? How can you talk to your sister that has crazy cramps and needs relief for her fibroids? How, like, there's so many uses, and we've got to find ways to connect to people using the things and the words, the tools, the things that they need, so they can be a part of the conversation. And that will never happen from people that are single-minded and only are interested in making money or putting their company in another space where they can make more money and they can take over and be dominant, because our culture is led by fear and domination instead of love and connection. And we at Humble Bloom lead with love and connection. How can we get people to see each other as human on a base level? How can we see this plant as an aid for our advancement and for our connection and love?
The difference between taking and giving, huh?
Yes, and I mean both. It's giving and taking. Like it's coexistence. We have to understand that there is not one without the other. And I think it was funny when you said, like, we need to communicate. Communicate is, yes, talking, but it's deep listening. Deep listening is an essential part of communication. When you say, oh, I heard you, you didn't hear me. You were sitting there waiting for your turn to talk. And your turn to scream whatever your opinion is. And it's like, no, sit there, digest, take a beat before you respond. Maybe your response is not your opinion. Maybe it's another question to learn more about something that somebody else knows or has an experience in. So for me, it's about curiosity for sure. It's about communication. It's about building bridges to foster like micro biomes of like diverse communities where people can help each other and take their differences and use it for good to make this shit flourish.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And let's make that happen. Solonje, I'm aware you would have head off, but before you go, if you had an unlimited bucket of money and time and a ticket to get to Grenada, soonish, what would you be doing?
What is she trying to do? What is she trying to do?
I'm manifesting.
Is she serious?
Manifesting. I'm like,
you just said the lady has to go, and now you're gonna set off for another 2 hours.
She's got 9 minutes.
I've got a couple minutes, but you see this? So there, I don't know if you can see this, but that.
Yeah.
So that is the painting that this girl did of me during the pandemic, right? And I look at it and I'm like, there's cannabis leaves everywhere. My dream is to just have a hat on, some overalls, and be in the fields, growing my own stuff, infusing it with the energy, making it an educational space, welcoming people there to pick, to harvest, to come to Reiki moments, to meditate, to fucking the fields for God's sakes and infuse
exactly.
that energy
Exactly.
we need to release.
Now you're talking.
Like, I want to have cannabis growing. I want to have other plants growing. I want to be able to live off of this farm probably half the year, go back and forth. That would be amazing. I would love to be able to bring education to cannabis in Grenada. I would love to even help be a voice for Grenada in other spaces. If I'm going to take my time and energy and my love of the plant and of our people and actually spend time in Grenada and get to learn about the people that live there and what we need to advocate for, there's a steep learning curve for people who have not been in it, whereas I have been in it. So how can I immerse myself in the Caribbean, get to know more about the population and the people and their needs, listen to them, and then go out and advocate for them? How can we grow some of the best quality flower? How can we then have trade in other places to build up wealth for the people on that island? So I feel like my commitment would be very much to grow, but not for myself, to educate people, to empower people, and then take whatever I'm doing and spread that and help people to understand that Grenada is great. We're doing amazing things, and I'm a part of that even though I wasn't born there, because I want to be here and because I want to.
Right on 2021. So
yes!
It's gonna happen, man.
Farm.
I couldn't control the shivers. I'm like,
education center, farm. Like, we're talking about people needing to learn. Like, come here, smoke if you want to smoke, shop if you want to shop. Go hang out and learn from that other person. Listen, like, digest it, and then go out and spread the word too. Become an ambassador for this plant. Feel empowered.
Now, funny you say that. Think of the backdrop to what you're saying as Grenada being basically one of the safest places on the planet, whether it's from nature or from man. Grenada is literally one of the safest places on the planet, and you definitely won't freeze.
Yeah, I mean, I was there last August visiting my mom's family and went up into the hills in Rady where they have land, and I'm just like, oh my God, my eyes were just like,
growing greenhouse.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. So it's
going to waste like this.
Can you imagine? Exactly. And you could, like, somebody asked me that something I tell my guests when I pick them up. Grenada is one of the few places you can go to the bush butt naked, and the most you probably have to worry about is a dog, some mosquitoes, and maybe a pervert. But all of those things you can control with a stick. Right. Maybe, but all of those things you can control with a piece of wood. So, okay, you get a stick, you can control almost all of those things. So you're good.
Carry a big stick. Oh my goodness.
The place is waiting.
And it fits so well. I mean, sorry, this is going out to people across the Caribbean, but I'm sorry, I just got to rep for Grenada. It fits so well with our legacy of us as a nation, the socialist history, the revolutionary angle of our people. It's just so fitting that, yeah, we've got to make it happen. Grenadians will make it happen, and people of the What's that?
That we can create a space so exceptional that everybody in the planet will want to come here. That's what Grenada has always been. And I think it can continue to be so once we get our heads out of our collective asses and start doing the things necessary to keep it that way or continue to make it that way.
Right. Like, and the thing is, not everyone has to. Some people can still keep their head up their ass as long as they're enough.
Oh, no, not everybody.
To take action. So,
right. That's it. Once those people.
What was that,
saying, as long as they're not obstructing progress, you can keep your head up your butt elsewhere. Like, don't come.
Thank you.
Decide to ruin my life. It's kind of like, if you're gay and you decide to do what you're doing, what does that have to do with me? If I'm smoking weed, what does that have to do with you? Like, just leave it alone.
Oh, you see me hugging you? You see me hugging you right now? I'm giving you big hugs. Big. For real, come here. I love you guys. You're the bestest.
This was so much fun. Thank you so
much. It
was
brilliant. Awesome. Yeah, we're going to have to continue the conversation because there's just so much, but and get other people from the region involved. But I just wanted to start it off with Grenada with you guys because you're legends. So yeah, thank you very much, and let's keep in touch. See what happens next. Bye. Bye.